So
I remember when Chuck came to our campus. I don't know when it was, Chuck, 20 years ago probably. And you had not done Mencken for a while. And I asked you, why not? And you said, well, the audiences quit laughing in the 1990s. That was your response. You may not remember saying.
No, I do remember that. It was mainly, I was doing claps. That's what all started. I came in for years. And it probably beginning in the late 70s. And kids loved it. And by the late 80s, they were looking at me as though I was some kind of an idiot. And some of them were offended. And I quit doing it for the students.
Must have been the Reagan effect.
well, it's the diary too, though. And Mencken was one of the first writers to get canceled with the National Press Club.
But not with undergrads. I wonder about undergrads. Would your students have known enough about the diary and its reception to say, "Oh, he's."
But I also think they simply didn't. I mean, the vocabulary.
Yeah.
They just didn't get a lot of it.
It's kind of like he has. It's kind of like Yiddish. I mean, to keep that going, he has his own. He makes up his own words, and he uses words that you've never heard of too.
I especially when I was maybe a teenager too, I loved Ecdesiast. That was one of his.
I didn't hear.
Ecdesiast.
Oh.
A shadow of clothes, so to speak, professionally.
On the subject of humor, Jim, it only occurred to me right now, and it must be from Treatise on the Gods, when you're asking about body parts.
Yeah.
It was his attempt, and it was being irreverent. It was his attempt to prove that the universe must have been run by a board of gods. Because it was a single god. How could he have made such a perfectly efficient and durable machine as the human hand? And yet make such botches of the tonsils and the uterus and the gallbladder and the prostate gland. It's a board of
These
gods.
juxtapositions make life very interesting because I remember so well, Chuck. That's what you said. You went through it, and I thought it was very funny. And then, a very distinguished person, but he goes up there and tries to claim, I think ridiculously, but that Mencken would have approved of intelligent design. So I tend to think, just thinking solipsistically, that Mencken might agree with me more, and you or not, that the human body might need some improvements, structural improvements.
I just wanted to make a comment in reference to the humor, but also I know I came late. I only got to hear your talk, and that talk about his political views and things like that answered every possible question I ever had about Mencken in what you described in examples. I admire Mencken for his straightforwardness, and since someone did mention the diaries, I actually think when I first came to the Mencken house and started learning more about Mencken in my older age, the diaries, it's a raw truthfulness in it, in his humor, and in what he wrote in the diaries, despite any of the controversial stuff that actually made me admire him more and respect him more, seeing the human psyche. I think he actually has a thread of egalitarianism in his philosophy, which is why, he sort of attacks all different people you wouldn't even expect him to. So that with humor is what really drew me to Mencken, and definitely thank you for your talk.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Anything further?
I do have one last little thing. It's just an aside. Every year, the Union Square Neighborhood Association puts on it's now a holiday cookie tour. And one year, my house used to be open, and one year this man came into my house, and it turned out he was a descendant of the Fortenballs who used to live in my house. And the Fortenballs, the original Fortenball, Johnson Fortenball the first or whatever, he owned a box making company down on Pratt Street. And when Houdini came to town, his company made the box for Houdini. But anyhow, so the first Fortenball died, and then like some sisters or daughters or other Fortenballs lived there, 2 females. They were spinsters, and they had a dog by the name of Skippy. And Mencken used to sit in the second floor front and type all day long. And Skippy used to bark. And Mencken really didn't appreciate Skippy at all. So the year after the first time I met Mr. Fortenbaugh, he came back and he handed me a copy of the lawsuit that Mencken sat upstairs and drafted one day when he was thoroughly annoyed. And you could hear the typewriter keys down there, and every word was cutting. Every single word was cutting. And I read the lawsuit and I said, oh my, you wouldn't even have to tell me that it was Mencken. I could read it and know that it was Mencken. I mean, he got his digs in every other word. It was amazing. And I said to my husband, the next dog we get, we're going to name it Skippy.
That's very interesting. Mencken has legal drafter.
Yeah.
It might be a little bit above the
I'm
average.
sorry.
That was in the diaries.
That's a reference.
That is a copy of that. So it must have been in the diaries.
Well-
Lawsuit. He talks about the dog in the lawsuit. In the diaries. I think that's right. Yeah.
Well, Johnson Fortenbaugh, who lives down on the Eastern Shore, brought me a copy that he had in his records. And Skippy, he won. Mencken won, and Skippy had to be removed. He had to go. I'm sorry.
Did it go to court? I didn't think it went to court. Well, it says-
The dog?
That's a very that's a great point. All I know is Skippy had to go.
Yeah, right.
Skippy had to find someplace else to live because Almond Street wasn't go to work.
Well, that's how the family got to the Eastern Shore.
Yeah, they went down.
They had to take Skippy all the
Follow
way
the dog.
One last thing. My brother-in-law pointed out to me some years ago, Mencken said, nobody of any good character would ever live at 1526 Holland Street. So, hey, Angel, here I am.
Proudly noted. Well, thank you all for being here. It's been a pleasure, and
Hello, everybody on my Zoom.
everybody on Zoom too. And
Should we all say goodbye?
maybe we should turn this around so the audience can wave goodbye.
You can see the distinguished group joining us.
A lot of Zoomers thought we were making it up. But you were. Okay.
Why not?
Really?
Thanks for coming. I'm going to sign off now.
Thanks, everybody.